Hello everyone, Razorblade Mango here, and today I am here to talk about the latest entry in the Like a Dragon series, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, or as it was known for a long time in the States, Yakuza. So this is the 8th mainline entry in the series as far as the numbered ones go. And as always, it was developed by Ryuga Gotoku Studio and published by Sega. If you have been following my channel for the last year, you will know how much I was looking forward to this game. This was tied with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth as my most anticipated game of the year. And I'm not gonna lie, I had some concerns going into it. Because after Lost Judgment, Ishin, and Gaiden, I was growing more worried that Ryuga Gotoku Studio was spreading themselves too thin and running out of steam and ideas. You know, don't get me wrong. All three of those games are good. Damn good, in fact. But I don't think they come close to hitting the highs of some of the past games in the franchise. So I went into Infinite Wealth thinking, I hope the kind of lack of inspiration that I felt in Lost Judgment, Ishin, and Gaiden isn't here. Because if this game turning out to be great means that we get 3 previous good but not great games in this franchise, that's a trade-off that I'm willing to accept, because if there's any one out of these games that I want to be great, it is Infinite Wealth, because this is the big mainline one, and it's the direct sequel to 7, which I think, in my opinion, is the best game in the franchise. I think Yakuza 7 is a masterpiece. And I'm very happy to say that I thought Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth was fantastic. I have issues with it, and I'll get into them. And I don't think it's quite as great as 7. But I love Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. And it's very rare that I will encounter a game that I will want to spend 115 hours getting the platinum for, and even a few hours beyond that finishing all the remaining side stories, because for some baffling reason one of the trophies in this game is not finishing all the side stories. It's weird like that. So the first things I want to talk about are the graphics and the music, which I don't really have a whole lot to say because these games, as always, look fantastic. I mean, with very few exceptions. I don't think anyone in this industry does facial animation better than RGG Studio. I mean, it's just immaculate, the amount of detail and attention to character that these games have when it comes to the facial animation. And there were moments in this game, and even back in Gaiden, I remember this, where it would show a certain area or a character in the distance, and there was a moment in my brain where I thought, is that real footage, or is that the game engine? And for a moment I had that thought, but even just getting me to that point of having that moment where it tricks my brain for a second into thinking it's real, that's incredible. And I also think, obviously, the character animations are fantastic. Hawaii is this big, beautiful open world to explore, and it has so much atmosphere and color and variety as far as its setting. I love all of the wacky character designs that the Sujimon have and the various villains have. This is one of those franchises that you can tell who is who by just looking at their face. And you can just see the years of history that they have in their eyes and in the crevices in their face and stuff like that. It's amazing what RGG Studio are able to do with the art direction and the graphics in these games. An area that I'm a lot less enthusiastic about is the music. Some of the orchestral music is nice, but I think the soundtrack is mostly forgettable in this game, honestly. And that's the one thing that normally I associate with great JRPGs that's missing from these Yakuza games is a really unforgettable soundtrack. And I like the music in these games. I mean, they're fine. They're background noise to me though. They don't really have the personality or the memorability of Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts, Chrono Trigger. None of that, which is disappointing. So I hope in the future they really bump it up as far as the soundtrack, because that's the one area where they're really trying to ape JRPGs that they don't have yet. So that was disappointing this time around, is that the soundtrack still is just as forgettable as it was in the last game. Next, let's talk about the story and the writing. If there's one area of this game that I do have a few problems with, it is the writing and the pacing, especially. The pacing, I think, is what mostly prevents this game from reaching the heights of 7. Because it definitely takes a while for this game to get going. And I think it has one of the slower starts than most of the games in the series. And look, I like slow openings to games. I'm the guy that thinks the opening prologue of Kingdom Hearts 2 is the peak of that series. I'm the guy that really enjoyed the opening to Assassin's Creed 3, for instance. So for me to come and say that it's very slow to start, that should say something, because this game definitely takes its time to get going. And I would say it takes about 5 to 6 hours before the game finally lets you off the leash and the story really starts to get going. And it's not that the opening hours are bad. No, not at all. They're very good. But there came a point where I started to wonder out loud, when am I going to get to my wacky Hawaiian adventure that I was promised? When is this going to start? And like I said, you get it after a certain point. It just requires a lot of patience. And if you're like me, somebody who does not like to rush through the main story in these games, because I like to do a lot of the side activities while engaging with the main story. And I set certain parameters and rules where I can't go on with the main story until I do certain things. So it's definitely a slow start for people like me. But thankfully what makes it a lot, more enjoyable is the writing, which is mostly great. I think the new characters are really interesting, and the new main and side protagonists are very likable. I just love listening to these people talk to each other about any random things. There are so many great, funny, hidden conversations in this game. Like, if you don't engage with things like the table talks and the drink links, you're gonna miss out on some really great character moments and really great character dynamics. And that to me is part of the fun. And I don't know why the hell you would even bother playing this game if you're not going to go out of your way to find all the little hidden conversations that these characters can have. Because I just love hanging out with these guys. They're so much fun to be around. And as far as the stories go, this game basically has 2 stories going on, where you have Ichiban's story and then you have Kiryu's story. And I think one story is definitely much stronger than the other one. So Ichiban's story is very good, but I don't think it's quite as enjoyable as it was in the first game. It feels almost like something is missing to add to the urgency and the context of what's going on in Ichiban's story. There's not going to be any spoilers here, so you don't have to worry about that. But it feels like there are a few moments that don't quite land as hard as they should with Ichiban's story, even though the build-up to those moments is great. And I feel like I like Ichiban a lot as a character, but there are certain points in his story where I kind of thought to myself, I don't know if I buy a certain thing that this character is doing or this certain thing that he's saying. And it starts to it happens one too many times for my liking that it starts to kind of become distracting in a way, where it pulls me out of the game and I think, wait a minute, that doesn't really make much sense from a character perspective, that doesn't really make much sense from a logic perspective. And I feel like certain elements of his story aren't as developed as I would like them to be, especially the villain of Ichiban's arc. However, what steals the show in this game is Kiryu's story. And I fucking adored Kiryu's story. I'm one of those people that just wishes they would let Kiryu go. I was disappointed to see him return in 7, but after seeing what they've done with him in this game, I now fully understand and fully support his inclusion in 8 as a main character, because I found his story to be very moving and thought-provoking for me on a deeply personal level. So Kiryu has cancer in this game, and he's given only a few months left to live. So they introduced an element into his story where it's all about reflection and taking care of business that still needs to be attended to. And it's all about him going off and encountering these people that he's met throughout the previous games, and some big, some small. But Kiryu's story just has this undercurrent of melancholy and nostalgia and regret and catharsis that resonated so personally with me, because I've been recently thinking a lot about my own legacy as a person, regarding my own life and, what have I done to make my life worth living? What kind of impact have I had on the people around me? What are people going to think of me when I finally die one day? Are there people out there that still think of me just based on things, that, our relationships may be, estranged or fractured? Do they think about me? So stuff like that. And to see my own current thoughts and feelings be reflected in a mainline Yakuza game featuring Kiryu, like the major character in the franchise, was just very serendipitous. And the things like the drink links and Kiryu's version of it in this game called the life links, they aren't mandatory. They're technically side content. And I get why. Because if doing all of these things was required, it would grind the game to a screeching halt, and the pacing would be thrown out the window. But I think doing this side content is essential to getting the maximum amount of enjoyment, context, and emotional impact out of the main mandatory stuff, especially with Kiryu's story. What I love too is that they found a really genius way to reuse the maps of Ijincho and Kamurocho and recontextualize them in a very impactful way by sprinkling these things around the maps called Memoirs of a Dragon, which are the spots on the map that trigger either a memory for Kiryu or a sub-story featuring a character from Kiryu's past. And I'm not going to spoil any of them here. If you want to find out what these are, you're going to have to play the game for yourself or look them up at your own discretion. I think Kiryu's story is maybe the most respectful and endearing send-off for an iconic video game character I've ever seen. I was floored by how they mostly handled Kiryu's story, and What's funny too, one of the character dynamics that I want to highlight is the unexpected friendship that develops between Kiryu and Seonhee. Watching her interact with Kiryu was a treat, and I loved just watching them interact and listening to them, and it's easily my favorite character dynamic in the game. Listening to their banter is so much fun, and the fangirl crush that Seonhee has on Kiryu is both hilarious and sweet. However, outside of the pacing, if there's any issue that I have with the story, is the epilogue. Because I think everything before the credits is satisfying, but the after credits epilogue is extremely disappointing. This is why I said I think they mostly nailed Kiryu's story, because that epilogue is so disappointing and took so much wind out of my sails, and I think it's missing at least 3 essential scenes that needed to be there. And it just feels rushed. It's almost like they ran out of time for this epilogue and they just hurried it along, and they said, oh, well, the audience can assume things and yada yada. And it's like, no. If you're gonna ask me to spend multiple hours with this story, you need to stick the landing with the ending. You need to make me feel like this was worth getting through. And ultimately it was, but it's just that damn epilogue is just so goddamn disappointing that when it ended and then the screen said, you know, Finn, as they always do in the Yakuza series, I kind of just sat there feeling like, are you fucking kidding me? That's it? So yeah, I really did not like the epilogue. I thought it was extremely disappointing. And as far as the voice acting goes, it's great, as always. Same with Gaiden. I think this is one of Takaya Kuroda's best performances as Kiryu, and I don't normally like to tell people how to play the games they pay for, but I just don't see the point in playing these games in English, especially this one, because the whole point of this game is Ichiban going on a fish out of water type of adventure. He's a stranger in a strange land, as far as him coming to America and him encountering a lot of American culture and English-speaking people. And it is quite funny to wander around and hear people speaking English to you and talking shit. What makes that so entertaining is that you hear the Japanese voices contrast with the English ones. So it just makes a lot more sense in my mind to play the game in Japanese so you get the most out of it, because with this game, it really loses a sense of the stranger in a strange land vibe when Ichiban and Kiryu and all these other characters come to Hawaii from Japan, yet they speak English against a backdrop of English-speaking people. It just doesn't really make any sense to me. And look, in theory, I appreciate them adding an English dub to these games. There are some people that don't want to read subtitles, that just want to play the game in English, and I know certain people that like to do it with these games, and that's fine. I guess you do you. I just don't get it. And I'll continue to be an elitist and gatekeeper about this until my dying day, especially with Infinite Wealth, because the setting and the vibe of it is impacted by the Japanese voice cast mixing with the English stuff. Am I talking crazy here, or am I just coming across as an asshole? I don't know, but that's just the way I feel with this. So moving on to the gameplay, which gameplay is fantastic. The turn-based combat is improved from last time. There's a lot more focus on positioning and momentum and the follow-up attacks and stacking enemies in a way where you can perform certain attacks and you'll get more of a damage boost out of it, or you'll hit multiple enemies at once. And this is already on the back of Yakuza 7, which had a fantastic framework to build on. And I feel like I don't know if I'd be able to go back to 7 after playing Infinite Wealth when it comes to the combat, because This to me really scratched that classic JRPG combat itch that I felt like was missing from Final Fantasy 16. And in a way, I think these, not just Infinite Wealth, but 7 as well, these games play much more in a direction I would like to see mainline Final Fantasy games go. Because I think, even after only 2 games, I think RGG have found a great way to modernize turn-based combat without sacrificing the soul of what it is, without sacrificing the strategy. And again, they have lots of options for combat. They have normal attacks, elemental attacks, team attacks, calling in the pound mates returns from the last game, saving up MP for supers, doing positioning, doing strategic healing, lots of options for combat. So it makes combat varied and diverse, and that makes it feel fresh, even until the very end of my playtime with it. The Persona influence is also back with the aforementioned drink links, which play out exactly like confidants and social links in Persona, and it's just as addicting as it was in 7. And I think it's somewhere in the middle portion of this game where the gameplay hits its peak, where the loop consists of, you doing your companion's drink links or Kiryu's life links, and that in turn makes the combat more fun because it gives you more options and opportunities for extra damage, and you just like listening to these people talk, and you enjoy doing the side content, and it just feeds itself in such a satisfying, fun, and addictive way that I really could not have imagined them doing as good of a job as they did with this game. And what I really love about this drink link system as well is that they found a way to have it make sense in this world, to have it feel organic, where of course when you go to the bar with your friends, you're gonna be engaging in deeper conversations, and that with the alcohol kind of, influencing, loosening some tongues and talking about some more personal, intimate things with your buddies or people you wouldn't normally say these things to. And again, it just makes so much sense in this world. And it makes a lot of sense too when you have characters like Ichiban and Kiryu, who you just are so charismatic and interesting that of course these people would open up to them. It's totally believable that they would. And the final things that I want to address are the side content and the post game. So, sub-stories are obviously a big part of the side content in this game. I think they are mostly good in Ichiban's story, and there's a healthy variety of stories and tones among them. But to be honest, there were only maybe a handful of them that had any kind of real noteworthy impact on me. I thought 7 was a major high in the series when it came to its sub-stories, and I think Infinite Wealth is a step down compared to it, unfortunately. I just don't think they took advantage of the Hawaiian setting as much as I thought they would. It's very superficial how they do it, where they have the obvious things like the hula dancing and playing on the beach with the sand and stuff like that, but I just think they could have been a little more creative with it. Plus, I hate to admit it, but I can tell that RGG is starting to run out of ideas for these sub-stories. Where they obviously put in a lot of effort are the 2 new additions to the side content, which is the Sujimon League and Dontoku Island, which I think the Sujimon League was much better than I expected, where this is basically a weirdo version of Pokemon. And I surprisingly got into it way more than I thought I would, because I really enjoyed the combat system with this type of Pokemon experience, and I truly thought this was a much better Pokemon experience than Pokemon Sword. And I think it would be wise if Game Freak were to steal some ideas from the Yakuza's Sujimon League. I really believe that. That's not hyperbole at all. And the other one, Dontoku Island, which is the obvious Animal Crossing New Horizons minigame, is very fun. Even if it doesn't quite hit that Animal Crossing sweet spot that I was hoping it would, it's not going to be replacing New Horizons as my go-to Animal Crossing experience, because I think the way it's structured, it's almost too grindy. I don't think there's enough variety in some of the things that you can do on Dontoku Island, even though I find the central story of Dontoku Island to be very sweet and fun and endearing. I really enjoyed that. And the other new mini games like Sicko Snap, Crazy Delivery, and Mismatch were interesting for a while, but I kind of grew a little tired of them once the novelty wore off. Out of the three, I'd probably say Mismatch has the most going for it, because there's lots of humor embedded into it because of the different dates in quotes you can go on, and you can get catfished by fucking weirdo people in certain scenarios, which is very funny. Outside of that, there are 2 main optional dungeons that you can partake in that have their own randomized layouts, and they have various floors and rewards you can get from them, and exclusive mini bosses, and those are fun. Even though I think they could have used, again, more variety in terms of just what they look like, because there really isn't much of a visual difference outside of an occasional filter they slap over the screen, and the returning stuff is still good as well. I like the vocational school, and that has its own funny ending to it. CanQuest is back. You have the series staples like mahjong and gambling and karaoke, and all that stuff is good. It's nice. They're nice little distractions on the side that you can do when you don't want to fuck around with the big side content or the big story missions. And finally, I want to talk about I have to address it because Sega fucking put it in here, is the monetization. Because I have a lot more of a problem with it here than I have in some of the past games, where this time around, the monetization comes in the form of level boosters and stat boosters. And unless you cough up $20 extra for the extra dungeon and the new game plus that comes in the deluxe edition, and you also don't buy any of the level or stat boost microtransactions, doing the grind to level 70 for the platinum is a fucking nightmare. And it's very obvious that the content that's in the base game was not at all balanced for getting someone on a brisk pace to level 70. And this is going to apply to a very small subset of people like me that wanted to get the platinum but did not want to reward Sega for their bullshit by coughing up $20 extra for the extra dungeon and new game plus, shit that should have been in the game to begin with. And I definitely was not gonna buy any of the fucking level boosting microtransactions. Fuck that. And the base game, if you don't engage with any of these systems, it's not balanced for that kind of grind, which makes the tactic, and I know this is what Sega is doing, or at least the question and the doubt is introduced to the equation. So all of this, it makes the tactic of Sega frustrating people who want to complete the base $70 version into spending more money even more egregious. This is some Ubisoft level shit that Sega is pulling. If I'm gonna criticize Ubisoft about it, if I'm gonna criticize any of these fucks about it, it's only fair game that I criticize Sega for it, because I think it's bullshit. I don't care how great Infinite Wealth is. This is completely unacceptable. What worries me about it is that because I see that the Platinum Trophy completion rate is so high, I wonder how many of these people coughed up for the $20 upgrade or spent money on the level boosting microtransactions. Because I'll be honest, if I hadn't gotten some level boosters from pre-ordering the game, because I think they give you quite a few, I think what they want you to do is spend them in the beginning so you get, level it up more early on. But what I did is I just hoarded them. I just was like, I'm not using these. I want to play the game the way it's meant to be played. So I very stubbornly did not use these level boosting things that Sega gave me for the pre-order. And I'm glad I did, because If I hadn't saved them and grinded out some of the side content to earn the level boost, the one-time level boost ones that comes attached to certain side activities, I don't think I would have gotten the platinum for this game, because the grind would have just been insufferable. And again, it calls into question the balancing that is around how much XP is required for level 70 or plus in this game. If you don't want to spend the extra money for New Game Plus, or you don't want to buy the extra dungeon, or you don't want to buy the microtransactions, it's unfortunate that this is the one stain on an otherwise very juicy apple that RGG and Sega have created. And I really just think it's so unnecessary and so unfortunate that this bullshit has to be here. I'm very disappointed in Sega for putting this in here. In conclusion, I think Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, even with my issues with it, and I have my fair share of issues, as you now know, I think this is a fantastic game. I love this game. I was mostly very pleased with how it turned out, and it assuaged a lot of my fears about RGG Studios spreading themselves too thin. And now with this game out, I hope they don't do anything in this franchise for quite a few years. Like, just leave it be. Maybe if you wanna bring something like Dead Souls to her current consoles and remaster that, I wouldn't have a problem with that because I've never played Dead Souls. But I think RGG at this point should just relax. Just go work on something else. Go, hell, make a new IP or something. I don't know. But leave Like a Dragon alone for a while. You have your great game. This is an accomplishment they should be very proud of. So I think they've earned a break from Like a Dragon. And I think as a base $70 experience, I can highly recommend Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. This is one of those games that justifies the $70 price tag in my mind because of how much quality content is here, because of how great it is, because of how engaging it is. Even with the caveat of the microtransactions in there. Because most people are not going to be like me, where they're going to want to get the platinum and they're going to want to grind to level 70 and max out all of Ichiban's personality stats and all that shit. So for those people, I can highly recommend this game without any caveats. But for the certain people that are like me, just keep in mind that caveat about the post-game grind. I think everything level 60 and beyond is where I have my issues with the balance in this game as far as how much XP you need. So there you go. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will catch you all later. Bye.